Good morning and welcome to the Life Force Health podcast here with me, Ben Calder, and another edition of the show. I'm really glad to be joined today by Elaine Godley of Perfect Health, who is a master wellness mentor, radio show host on Elastic FM, an Amazon #1 best-selling author who's beaten cancer for herself 4 times, cured herself of serious kidney disease, is a qualified nutritionist, psychologist, former athlete, business consultant, and is an all-round appreciation of how to achieve and maintain your own perfect health. And on top of that, Elaine is an OBE as well. So, and this is my first interview with an OBE. So, Elaine, hello and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ben. I was chuckling to myself as you were reading that introduction there. Gosh, that's me. It's amazing how we forget how many things we've done over the years. And as I'm in my 60s now, when I look back, I think, yeah, well done, good.
Yeah. So tell us a little. I mean, you've done incredibly well. Tell us a little bit about what you are doing and what you offer to people in the world at the moment.
Well, as the introduction said, I was in business. I'm still in business technically, but through being over optimistic, over ambitious, I burnt out in 2009, and I had my first cancer diagnosis. And since then, I've done an awful lot of training, reading, experiential stuff, learning about health and well-being. So I've now kind of transformed into a health mentor. And because of my cancer experience, I know how to get out of jail with it now. I know how to avoid it. I know how to get out of it when you've got it. So I offer a free support for people with either a current or a previous cancer diagnosis. I've got a wellness hub online with my website, perfect-health.co.uk. So that's the cancer side of things. But I give talks and presentations and so on about all things optimistic and well-being, and basically you can do anything you set your mind to, and all that sort of positive stuff. And I'm often accused of being over optimistic and over positive, so I try and balance out, and the way I do that now is through my group on Facebook. So that's called the Perfect Health Wellness Club, and I've got 3,000 members in there, and they keep my feet on the ground. They keep a balance, so we get positive, more positive than not, but we also get realistic, common sense guidance and advice from a whole myriad of members, some of whom are qualified medical practitioners. I'm not. I'm a nutritionist, but not to the level that you're qualified, Ben. Not by any means, but I know enough, to get by and to guide people. And we've got professors, we've got medical doctors, nurses, all kinds of people in there. So whatever health aspect is required, we've got a search field that people can get some advice for free in the group. So and that's it pretty much.
Yeah, and you've got some amazing people in there. I mean, I'm lucky enough as well to have been a guest on your radio show a couple of times, and also to have presented in the Perfect Health Wellness Club Facebook group as well. So, I really recommend people to check that out. I'll put links to both your website and the Facebook group into the notes for the podcast at the end. So if people want to check those out, we can take them directly to that. But today we're here to talk about your role as co-author in the just released Life After Birth Trauma book that's coming out. And for those of you that have been listening to the podcast, you'll know that Elaine is one of the 3 authors from that book who I've been interviewing. And you can find all the other interviews here on the podcast as well as the review that I've done for the book. I was really lucky enough to get a copy of the manuscript ahead of its publication. So I've read everybody's story. And for myself, I've been working with birth and birth trauma, and I hadn't really even thought about it in that way until Jessica Prime, who's the main editor and the initial author in the book, got in touch with me about this. And I realized through my kinesiology career, I've actually helped with a lot of fertility issues with women and men. I've helped with a lot of difficulties during pregnancy for women. I've done a surprising amount of sessions where women have gone past their due dates, been kind of advised to be induced, don't want to be induced, so they've come to see me instead, and done a little bit of kinesiology with them, and every one of them has gone into labour that day and had a natural birth. And I started getting to the point where I can actually test for how long until they go into labour, how long until the baby's born, and my best rate on that so far was to be in 4 minutes of the birth time. So I've done some quite interesting stuff, plus dealt with the scar work and with the kinesiology work, a lot of post-traumatic stress from birth, and a lot of stuff that women hadn't even realised was birth trauma, but just things that have been there since the birth of their children, and they've just kind of taken it on as normal, and that seems to be very much the case. And I mean, for you, Elaine, to be chosen as an author in this project as well, had you really considered the experience with your two children as birth trauma prior to this?
Not at all. I'd never given it a one thought. Not only for the birth trauma, but you mentioned OBE originally, which isn't the grand thing that you go to Buckingham Palace for, although I have been there. But it's out of body experience. So
yes, it's still my first OBE.
So I hadn't given it a thought, and it was only kind of looking back, and when Jess said to me, do I want to contribute? When I started thinking about it, I thought, yeah, actually, I've had two, not just one. I've had two of them. So ask away, Ben.
Yeah, sure. So tell us a little bit about your story in the Life After Birth Trauma book. Give us a little synopsis for you of what was in there.
My daughter was born in 1982. Prior to that, I had been on antibiotics for many, many years for a kidney disease I was born with, which I subsequently healed naturally, which is that's for another conversation. But because I was on the antibiotics, the doctors wanted obviously to protect the baby, and I was brought into hospital 10 weeks. Well, in fact, my whole stay in hospital was 10 weeks. Wow. And that was because of the problems with the antibiotics for me, and that which suited my daughter Charlotte was subsequently born. So they were monitoring my own body, obviously, but monitoring the body of the baby, the not the body, what do you call it? Well, the baby, I suppose. Yeah. And she was reacting to various different medications that I was on, of course, which because now I understand it all, it makes sense. But nobody explained any of this at all. Yeah. So this went on, and then I was induced, and I had a very, very long labour, and the whole thing went completely wrong. I had a very short, didn't know this at the time, had a very short umbilical cord, and she was the wrong way round as well, so she wasn't going to come out, herself. So I ended up, I got cut from front to back, and I'd gone through gas and air, I'd gone through all sorts of pain-killing things. My husband of the day got thrown out because he was getting belligerent and very difficult and thought he knew better, so that was all very stressful. And I remember the OBE, I remember being up on the sort of out-of-body experience, up as I'm laying on the bed. If you imagine, if you were to look at, say, 2 o'clock, imagine you're laying on the bed and you look 2 o'clock, I was up there, forward facing, or facing back towards me, seeing everything that was going on. Wow. And then again, as I say, I just never gave it a thought until years and years later, when somebody said out of body. I thought, oh, I've had one of those. Yeah. And there we are. But the induction process was horrible and very, very painful. Yeah. Manual extraction in the end, so that the doctors had to go in literally manually from down below to get Charlotte out. Yeah. And she was blue and horrible, and I was just left there on a slab, as it were, literally on my own, covered in blood, not a single person with me, not a nurse, nobody. It was horrific when I look back now, but I didn't consider any. Well, just thought, oh well, I'm not going to have another one of those. That's
Yeah,
to
sure.
be tortured around, and that's why it took 12 years for me to have another child.
And that's one of the things that's really quite interesting about the Life After Birth Trauma book is that, in one way, and I don't know if it's just because I'm a male as well, and maybe my experience or my expectations around that were different, but reading it, I was genuinely shocked at how much of a horror show it was for so many of the women that have contributed towards this book, and I think so important to see. I mean, for you as well, especially in those weeks that you were, those 10 weeks that you were in hospital with Charlotte, was it a surprise to you that there was so much testing going on? And did you feel like you were really being included in that, as an individual, as a person? Were you being included in that consultation of what they're doing and why?
Not at all, not at all. Also, at the time, way before internet and anything like that, I was running a very successful business at the time, my first major business, and my secretary and PA was coming in the hospital every day to see me, and so I was running a business at this time from the hospital bed, and my attention was more on the business than it was on anything that was going on around me. So I probably wasn't a normal patient, shall we say, in hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, was that a distraction technique as well for yourself? Do you feel that there was an unconscious, if I focus on something else, then I don't have to think about this?
Could well have been, yeah. I considered the whole thing an inconvenience because I needed to be back at the business, sorting things out, because I was a woman in a man's world, which I've wanted to be my whole life with various things that I've done. So, the bossy woman organising and project managing and this sort of thing. I was running a kitchen business, so running various different projects. So I'd have a strip out of one person's house, and then somebody else would go in and do the electrics and all the shenanigans that goes on with it, with the kitchen fit. And I was running several of them simultaneously. Plus, I had a showroom to run as well. So it was a busy time, and an alcoholic husband. So the whole thing was quite stressful from my perspective. And this whole baby business was a bit of an inconvenience.
Really, and quite a bit to add on the top there. But then to kind of have been induced, and in the way I read it in your story, there was very little consultation or explanation of what was going to go on for you. And what was it like when they got to that point and just said, right, this is what we're doing, on you go?
Oh, I just screamed louder. The pain I was in, because there was no pain. I've got a very, very high pain threshold. I have walked around in the past with a dislocated hip. And when I went to the chiropractor, the lady said to me, oh my dear, it's no wonder you're in pain. You have a dislocated hip. So for me to scream in pain, that means look out, I really am in pain. And it just levels, and to the point, and I do wonder, looking back now, whether the OBE was me thinking, oh, I've had enough of this, I can't cope with it anymore, and floating off, and then realizing, hey up, I've got more to do in this life, and coming back again. I do wonder, but I don't know much about these experiences at all, and I've not read anything. I just know from my own perspective.
Yeah. And have you had any other out-of-body experiences since that point as well?
Yes, 1985, I had a dental operation, and I was supposed to have gone in. It was in a private hospital. It was supposed to have just been a few hours, and I had what they call an apicectomy, a piece of bone removed from my upper mouth, and this is just above my teeth. And I was in there for 5 days, and it turned out I was allergic to the drug that was used in the anaesthetic called succinylcholine. And I'm supposed to carry around with me. I keep forgetting, actually. I must make a new one, a card. They use it in emergency situations, this drug. And if I was to have an accident and they use that, well, I'm sure they bring me round again. Yeah, they knocked me out, and they didn't know what the problem was. And similar situation. So imagine me on the bed, but this time it wasn't 2 o'clock, which was the birth OBE. This was, just get my bearings right, 7 o'clock.
Okay.
So I was back the other way, high up, looking down, and I was watching the doctors and nurses. The surgeon stayed with me the whole 24 hours after the surgery. That's how worried they were.
Wow.
But it was 5 days later I came out. But that was just again another OBE. But again, I didn't even know I'd had it, and it was years later, looking back, that I kind of tied the two experiences together. But they were different. One was, as I say, at 2 o'clock, looking down on me, and the other one was 7 o'clock, and I've no idea what the meaning of that, if there is a meaning, I don't know.
Sure. So, and you mentioned earlier on as well that there's about 12 years difference between Charlotte, your daughter, and Andrew, your son. Is that right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
And was it a difficult choice to kind of decide to have a second child at the time as well?
Well, I was absolutely adamant I wasn't going to have any more children. And when I met my Andrew's father, I thought what a great dad he would be. And we were having some renovation work done in our house at the time, and the builder kept on talking about his children. And I was watching Brian's reaction, and I thought, oh, it's selfish of me, not to have children. So we talked about it briefly, and Andrew was born in 1994.
You didn't feel under pressure from Andrew's dad to kind of have children?
Not at all. No, not at all. No, he's a very gentle, lovely, kind person. But it was a completely different scenario. I was in control at this stage. I wasn't going to go through that nonsense again. So I was born with a few problems with my spine, and I've been hospitalised in the past with back problems. So I sort of laid it on a bit and said that because of my back problems and because of the previous dodgy experience, I want to have an elected caesarean. And they tried to talk me out of it, but there's no way I could go through that malarkey again. So it was all agreed, and I had a epidural caesarean, so I was awake for the experience, and that was absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever. And a bit weird, being awake while somebody's doing the washing up in your stomach. That's kind of what it felt like. But that was I was in control, and I'm a person who needs to be in control for everybody's benefit. So that was a totally different experience. And but when I had Andrew, I hadn't realised, but he was purple, and my mother noticed when she came in, and then so he then got whisked away to the ICU, and I was given a Polaroid photograph of him by my bedside. My back had completely gone by this stage. During the pregnancy, I had a special corset made with bones all around the back, and then as my tummy grew, so the corset, I was able to expand it, so that helped to support my back.
Yeah.
And I had this photograph of him, and I wasn't getting visitors because they were going straight to ICU to see Andrew, and not, a lot of people didn't come to see me. And there was one time a few days later where Brian managed to get hold of a wheelchair and very gently pushed me along the corridor and the lifts and whatnot to go and see Andrew in the incubator. And he was, as I say, he was there for a good few days. Yeah. So that was traumatic, but not because of not being consulted or anything like that. That was just one of those things, really. And also, it's part and parcel of when people have cesareans, when the baby's lifted out, the oxygen and the, well, more, probably more about this than I do, but something to do with the oxygen and the clearing their canals. Doesn't happen because they don't have to work hard. They just get lifted out, and they've not done the work to get out of the birth canal.
I mean, did you find it strange as well, and given how my perception is that elective caesareans, certainly in maybe the last 10 years or so, have been much, much more easy to arrange and organise, even if there isn't a particular medical issue for it. So didn't you find it strange that it took so much to get the doctors at the time to agree to that caesarean section for you?
I think I was probably their problem, rather than the surgery, because I just wasn't having it. When I explained what I'd gone through, and as I say about my back, it's common sense to anybody. You don't need a brain surgeon to work out what kind of mindset I was in, and what the practical situation was, and also bearing in mind in the 12 intervening years, my back had got worse, and I had been hospitalised with the problems. So I was just kind of pushing that way, and I wasn't going to take no for an answer. The only thing that was a bit disappointing, I would like to have had him on the 5th of September, because that was our wedding anniversary, but the doctor was on holiday, so I had him on the 6th, but that's not a bad compliment, really, is it?
No. I mean, do you feel as well that, given the spinal difficulties that you were having, and with Andrew being taken into NICU as well, do you feel that had any effect on the early bonding between the two of you?
Definitely, most definitely. We've never really bonded. Andrew's now 26 this year, and we've never really bonded. Having said that, Andrew actually is autistic. He has Asperger's syndrome, which we didn't know until he was 12 when we had a diagnosis. He was behaving in ways that were different to my daughter, and everybody said, "Oh, it's 12 years different. You're older. Boys are different to girls. It's no problem." Some of Andrew's behaviour was hidden from me. Schools weren't explaining how Andrew was behaving. Had I known, and what I know now is just that the schools were just so neglectful. But anyway, again, that's probably another book one day.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It seems to me, and again, having spoken to you and the other authors I've spoken to, that there's a wealth of material around so many interlinking aspects of this that I could almost see a whole series of books coming from birth trauma to the early years and so on, and looking at the challenges that took place at various stages through here, because it doesn't seem like there's this consistent, easy pattern of being able to just do things in a simple way and do things in an easy way, and there seems to be a lot of complexity within health that is just not really being addressed very well.
I think a lot of that is to do with a lack of training and compassion. There are so many medical schools that push the doctors through now without a single ounce of common sense. It's drugs. They're trained to cut, burn, or poison us. Anything outside of that, and as you know, there's no nutritional guidance in there. I'm very pleased to see some of the younger doctors now, particularly the Asian doctors, who've grown up with good nutrition, good food and cooking from scratch and everything. Some of them are now waking up and smelling the roses and bringing their work into the Western world. It is changing. It definitely is changing. But with the pace of the world as it is today, is it fast enough? I don't know.
Sure, and I think we're seeing some radical changes taking place in how the world is going to be. But like you, I'm really pleased. I mean, one of my favorite kind of celeb doctors, who's on the kind of the social circle at the moment, is Dr. Chatterjee, and just seeing his attitudes towards actually using our common sense to thinking about health in a basic way, to making little changes in our lives for the better. It's really nice to see that coming from a mainstream doctor. And it's also nice here in Shrewsbury in Shropshire, where I'm based, that we have a young doctor, Lale, who has started her own community charity here for people. She's a Muslim background herself personally, but has opened a place called the Universal God Centre, which is for multi-faith practice, discussion, healing, support, conversation. And so she's doing this on top of her full-time GP job, which I'm just astounded by, but very glad to see as well.
Excellent. Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and the other one that I follow is Dr. Rupi Anju, who is of similar persuasion, shall we say, with Eastern influences, and he Dr. Rupi has something called the Doctor's Kitchen, and he's every week puts out these wonderful recipes, all home cooked, organic, really good, fantastic, both of them. I've met both of them, and in person they're amazing men, and very common sense, lay sort of approach to healthcare. We can heal ourselves at home. Well, we can put our environment in a state where our body heals itself. It's not rocket science, but most of us aren't educated on it.
Yeah. So given what you know now, given all these years of experience, given all of the experiences that you've had as an individual, the recovery from the cancer, the healing of the kidney disease, the nutritional information, all of the learning that you've had, what advice would you give to couples planning pregnancy?
Do your research, talk to each other, agree what you want between you, how you want things to go. And there are many, many places out there now who do support natural birthing, and see a chiropractor, see a nutritionist, a kinesiologist, go to your centre, liaise with you, of course. And there's lots of people like you, around and about now. But it's difficult to find them. So, I mean, maybe I'll put it back to you, Ben. How can people find practitioners like you?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, most of the time it's definitely internet research, and you do want to look at people that have specialisms within pregnancy. And the doula network is a useful place to check that out, because a lot of the doulas are natural birth trained and have connections into a lot of research and a lot of other practitioners who can support within pregnancy and within health issues as well. And as I've mentioned on the other two interviews that I've done for this, is that we have a fabulous resource here in Shrewsbury, a lady called Sue Barber, who's been a natural birth supporter and teacher for many years, and looks at things like birth stories and does birth rehearsal and womb blessings and all sorts of other things to really bring you into a sense of ownership and power with what you're doing. And I think actually, know thyself is one of the best things that you can do. So any form of meditation, any form of mindfulness that allow you to really get to know what your body's trying to communicate has a massive value.
Absolutely. Know thyself, know thy body, and if things aren't right, then do something about it. Take guidance.
And what would your top do's and don'ts be as well? If you were, let's. I mean, I don't. Am I right in thinking that Charlotte's already had children as well? Has she?
Yes. Charlotte has. In fact, my youngest grandson turned 16 this week on St.
Oh wow! Okay. Did you have any particular do's and don'ts for her when she was pregnant, or have you got anything now that you would really say, definitely do this, definitely don't do that?
Well, definitely, as I say, do your research, and as you say, the doula network is a good place to start. But again, the average person doesn't know what dueling is, and again, it's Dr. Google, the internet searching really is I think the main thing. Of course, in my day, nothing was available like that. We barely had telephones, just do your research, know what you want, and don't accept second best. If you want a natural birth, go for a natural birth, but obviously be realistic there as well, because if you have existing medical conditions, for example, if you're small framed and you're carrying a big baby, don't need to be rocket science to work out that it's going to be very difficult to get out. So in that case, you may need a cesarean. So even though you do want to have a natural birth, so you have to be practical and realistic about it. But if you want a natural birth, then why not? And there's lots of different, there's water births and all kinds of meditation and hypnosis and all sorts to get you through these days. And don't accept second best. Go for what you want, and put your foot down with a firm hand, as my mum used to say.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, isn't it? Is that it's easy for people to have this idea that they either need to do a mainstream health practice or they need to do a complementary health practice. But rarely do people really kind of appreciate that actually the best of both worlds is probably the best way to do it. Take all the information, look at what's right for you. The more informed you can be, the better it will be, and the better you'll be able to make decisions and have a good plan, but recognize that the plan is not the territory. The map is not the territory. We plan for several possibilities, and then we see what the land's like when we get there.
Exactly. An integrative version of for our own health and well-being as well. Integrative health is the way to go. Take the best of all worlds, because we do need the National Health Service when we're in a crisis, absolutely. But for ongoing health and well-being, we can do it ourselves.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I find that kind of interesting. I'll very briefly dip onto where the UK is right now here as we record this, but if there was one of my favorite kind of online truth sayers, shall I class him as, JP Sears, who's a great comedian, but a lot of experience within the health world and within the coaching world. He kind of joked about Corona in the way that, if you think that an OCD level hand washing regime is going to save you from decades of food abuse, bad diet, low exercise, and not taking care of yourself, then you're kind of kidding yourself a little bit. And I think it highlighted a really important thing, that above all else, for me, I'm trying to encourage people pre-conception to spend at least 6, if not 12 months healthy diet, working on some of the psychological stuff, making sure the relationship's in a great place before we get into conception, so that we can do health in a really good way. And then when we get to the kind of the pointy end of the stick with kind of the birth process happening, then we're already in a much better place, already in a much healthier state, and we can do a lot more for that.
That's a good point, Ben, because a lot of people don't realise that the state that the woman is in, and the man, or however it works these days, there's lots of computations around now, but the woman who's giving birth, the state that she's in will transform through the baby as well, won't it? Because the state of anxiety or medication or drinking or smoking or whatever it is, the poor baby is hostage to whatever state the woman is in.
Yeah, and I think that it's not as often considered, and my experience is that too often there is an automatic assumption that having a child is a good choice, without really looking at your own situation, your health, your well-being, what it is you will actually be as a parent. Are you going to be in a position where you can emotionally educate that child, where you can physically, socially educate that child? And I'm not talking about from a financial point of view, but although that's relevant as well, but also from a sense of, do I have the emotional intelligence and the emotional upbringing to really honor this life that I'm going to take responsibility for in the world? And if not, should I be doing this at this point in my life?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I've never heard anybody speak about that as a thing, kind of, what state are you in emotionally, when you're going into this? It's not, emotions aren't something that is ever discussed, really, are they?
And yet it has a massive implication in how the rearing and the raising of any child will be. If you are still holding a lot of shadow, a lot of emotional baggage, a lot of difficulties from your own past, and I fully respect that so many people have had difficult upbringings, that to actually spend a decent amount of time really understanding that and managing that before you have children is a healthy choice and a responsible choice to make.
Exactly. I remember when I first held Charlotte, I realised the enormity of what had happened. I'd got this thing, this person that was just reliant upon me, and I didn't know diddly. In fact, I was in the fortunate position that when Charlotte was little, we had nannies that looked after her, because as I explained, I was running a very busy, my first very busy business, and I wouldn't get dressed in the morning until the nanny had arrived, because I was petrified that something might happen to her while I was in the shower. And I was really, really concerned, and so I took advice from somebody who was trained to look after a child. So that's how I coped. I don't know how I would have coped had I not been able to have help. My mother lived away, a long way away from me, up in the Lake District. I was down in East London, and that's how I got through. So it's easy to understand how some women can easily fall into the postnatal depression scenario.
Absolutely, and just have far more difficulties than they might have if appropriate and adequate planning had been put in place. And I personally see that there are cases of children being born because there's an objectification in there. It's this is the thing in my life, this is the next stage in my life, so now I have a child. It's not a question of whether or not that's a good thing, a useful thing, a beneficial thing, a healthy thing. Just, this is my time and I'm going to do it. And there can be consequences then going forward, because of how children are then raised, and the effect that it will have on their lives and the relationships they have. And we can go back generations and generations and ask all the same questions as well. And but we are in a time and a position now where we can assess this differently and assess this with a broader vision, and hopefully make better, healthier choices. And I'm hoping work like the Life After Birth Trauma book will really help with that as well.
Yes, let's hope so. Let's hope it gets to #1 bestseller, as their other books have done. Be wonderful.
I'm sure it will. And Elaine, thank you so much for joining me today on the Life Force Health podcast, so we can talk about the Life After Birth Trauma book and your section in there. And if anybody would like to get in touch with Elaine and connect into her as a wellness mentor, you can find her on the perfect-health.co.uk website, and also the Perfect Health Club Facebook group as well. Elaine, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
And I will no doubt be speaking to you in one way, shape or form at some point in the future.
No doubt.
Yeah. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today. If you have any questions, comments, please get in touch with us through the podcast. But otherwise, we'll look forward to hearing from you on another edition of the Life Force Health podcast in the future. Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves.